My husband Tom often insults me. One time, during a family gathering, my uncle, who had been drinking, said, "My wife is ugly, and her cooking is terrible." Other men agreed with him, and Tom got more excited as they laughed. He kept repeating my complaints about his behavior, looking proud of himself. I felt embarrassed and angry, but before I could respond, my mother-in-law suddenly stood up and glared at Tom, asking, "Is that all you have to say?" The room fell silent. "My name is Emma. I'm 40 years old and work in the medical office. I met Tom, who is 4 years older than me, through our shared love for tennis. We've been married for 13 years and wanted children, but we couldn't have any. My in-laws often worry about us, especially my mother-in-law, who has become like a mother to me since my own mother passed away when I was young. We have a good relationship and enjoy spending time together." For the first 10 years of our marriage, things were fine, but then Tom became very controlling and unkind. He started working more overtime and traveling often. 3 years ago, he was transferred to a different department, and now he's hardly home during the week. When he does come back, he acts like I'm a servant, just asking if dinner is ready or if the bath is prepared. One day, I finally told him, "You're not a child anymore. You should prepare your own clothes." He responded angrily, saying, "It's your job to obey me as my wife." For an hour, he yelled at me and blamed me for everything. He would bring this up whenever he was upset, and I felt helpless. At dinner one evening, he complained about my cooking again, saying, "What's with all the vegetables? Am I a rabbit? Get some meat out." I explained that I thought it would be better for his high cholesterol to eat less meat, but he interrupted me. He got up, threw my food on the floor, and said, "No one knows my body better than I do. I'm going to eat out." Then he left the house, taking only his wallet and phone, and slammed the door behind him. Every day, I searched the internet for recipes to help my husband reduce salt and meat in his diet because his cholesterol was high, but all my efforts felt useless. One day, after making a mess in the kitchen, my husband came home 3 hours later, humming a song and clearly drunk. I picked up his coat from the floor and noticed it smelled like grilled meat and perfume. I had suspected in the past that he was cheating, but without proof, I tried to ignore it. However, the perfume smell made me even more suspicious. Whenever he was in a bad mood, he would leave without saying anything, and when he returned, he would take a bath right away. I could smell the same perfume from his coat, even when it was in the laundry basket. Feeling more certain that he was cheating, I decided I needed to find proof. 3 weeks later, we were heading to my in-laws' house for New Year's Day, where all the relatives gathered for a party. When we arrived, my mother-in-law had prepared a beautiful and delicious New Year's dinner. We greeted everyone and sat down to eat. My husband watched me with a dissatisfied look as I enjoyed my mother-in-law's cooking. He suddenly shouted, "Where are the chopsticks?" I went to the kitchen, got them from my mother-in-law, and handed them to him. Then he asked for cups, complaining that I should have gotten them without him asking. Despite all the relatives being there, he kept criticizing me. I tried to stay calm and handed him a glass, and he smiled as he enjoyed his drink. My uncle offered me a drink too, but my husband quickly said no, claiming, "She is my driver." Meanwhile, my mother-in-law and the other women were busy in the kitchen, preparing food and drinks for the men, while I wore an apron and helped out. My father-in-law and the other men were having a great time, drinking and laughing loudly. I felt bad for the women working hard while the men were enjoying themselves. My mother-in-law made some hot tea for us, and while we chatted, I suddenly heard my husband's voice from the living room. He suggested, "Let's go around and share things we usually keep to ourselves. Let's relieve some stress by talking about them." It was New Year's, and everyone cheered at my husband's suggestion to play a game. The loser of rock, paper, scissors could say whatever they wanted. My husband, who had been drinking, seemed so tipsy that he could barely talk. "This sounds fun." My mother-in-law smiled, looking interested. I had something in mind for the party too. When my husband suggested the game, I decided to take advantage of the situation. I grabbed something from my bag and put it in my apron pocket. The game began with loud cheers. The losers complained about their salaries or their bosses, and everyone agreed with them. Finally, my husband lost, and it was his turn to voice his complaints. I felt both excited and anxious about what he would say. My complaint is that my wife is unattractive and her food tastes bad, he announced. I was shocked and my mind went blank. My father-in-law awkwardly cleared his throat. When you got married, you praised her beauty and cooking, he said. That was a long time ago, Dad. Now she only serves tasteless food, like rabbit food, my husband replied. My uncle's face darkened. That's terrible. As his wife, she should do better, he added. Other men agreed, not knowing that I had been trying hard to take care of my husband's health and cooking every day. I felt embarrassed and angry, wanting to run away. The conversation shifted to the men's complaints about their wives. I work hard every day, so I deserve more money. Stop complaining and just obey me, my father-in-law said, smiling. Meanwhile, the wives looked down in silence. Then it was my husband's turn again. Everyone is lucky to have kids, he said. My wife is defective and can't have children. He knew how much I wanted children, and I never thought he would say something so hurtful. Sadness and frustration filled my heart. I took a deep breath, trying to hold back my tears. Everything will be fine, Emma, my mother-in-law said gently. Taking my hand, she sighed deeply and stood up with a serious look, walking toward my husband. Everyone was surprised when my mother-in-law shouted. She usually seemed kind and obedient to my father-in-law. The fun atmosphere suddenly changed to a quiet tension. We're all having a good time, my father-in-law said to her. There's no need to be angry. You men are the only ones enjoying yourselves. You're the ones who need to stop, she yelled. Shame on you. My father-in-law looked down, troubled, and the other men seemed uncomfortable. One of the women, who had been quietly nodding, suddenly started clapping and said, Don't be afraid to speak up. Let us say what we want, and we'll feel better. Her words encouraged the other women to voice their feelings. They began to complain one by one. If you want more money, earn it yourself. If you don't want us to complain, then do things for us. When the wife spoke out, the men were speechless and began to apologize, but my husband just remained cold and didn't seem to care. What's wrong with telling the truth? Why should I apologize? He asked. A man named Noah replied, and they exchanged awkward looks. I won't apologize. I still think you're an unattractive wife, a bad cook, and a woman who can't have children, my husband said, humiliating me again. At that moment, my sadness and frustration turned into rage. You have no right to say that to me, I calmly said to him, while secretly reaching for my phone that I had hidden in my pocket. It's not fair that you get to relieve stress while I don't. You have complaints about me. Well, I have complaints about you. I pulled out an envelope from my pocket and spread out the pictures on the table for everyone to see. The photos showed my husband entering a hotel room with another woman and leaving her apartment holding her hand. I had put a GPS device in his car to track him and take pictures of his affair. I planned to discuss it privately with my mother-in-law, but now I needed to reveal it to everyone. Everyone was shocked, and the room grew noisy as my husband tried to gather the photos back. Isn't it common for husbands to cheat on their wives? He asked the men, looking for their agreement, but no one agreed. When my uncle, who had previously supported my husband, spoke up against cheating, saying, No, that can't be forgiven, the other men nodded in agreement, but my husband just laughed and said, You guys can't even cheat on your wives. Shame on you. When my uncle heard my husband's words, he stood up and said, Who's the most shameful here? The other men agreed, glaring at my husband. He tried hard to look strong and right, but I found it disgusting, so I decided to confront him with more evidence. I got a call a week ago from Maruka-san, your new love. I heard you've been dating her for 3 years. Who is Maruka? He asked, trying to act innocent. I don't know what you're talking about. I heard she's 7 months pregnant, I replied. He was getting agitated, trying to make excuses. She wanted me to divorce you, but I told her I wouldn't because you wouldn't accept it. Really? That's funny since you claimed you didn't even know her name. I took out my cell phone from my apron pocket, put it on speaker, and turned up the volume so everyone could hear. "Did you hear that, Maruka-san?" She sniffled, sounding like she was crying, and said quietly, "Yes." I had called her the day before New Year's and told her I would call her today to see what my husband was really thinking. She had agreed, and now she overheard everything. "I'm getting a divorce, and he asked me to wait until then," she cried. My husband protested. "I never said that. You understand, right? You're the only one who betrayed me." Hearing that, he looked down and fell silent. "I will never forgive you," she shouted before hanging up. She had believed my husband's lies. "Here are the divorce papers. Sign them right now," I said, pushing the papers toward him. He became furious. "Don't be ridiculous. I can't just sign this. How dare you? You owe me 2 million yen in alimony. I'm never going to divorce you," he shouted, stamping his feet like a child. I couldn't help but almost laugh at how childish he was acting, but I kept demanding the divorce and alimony. "Tom, you're not a little kid. It's time to grow up." My mother-in-law looked frustrated by my husband's pathetic behavior. She looked at him with frustration. "You have no right to refuse the divorce or the alimony. Accept what's happening with dignity." "It's not that easy, ma'am. You understand how I feel, right, Dad?" "No way. I can't be responsible for what you've done." Reluctantly, my husband signed the divorce papers and agreed to pay alimony. Holding back his tears, I thought this gathering would be the perfect time to reveal his affair, so I pushed him even more. "I'm ending our lease at the end of this month because you don't need homes to come back to, right?" When I said this, the women applauded and the men sighed deeply. My husband left my in-laws' house quickly, trying to avoid everyone's gaze. The next day, we submitted the divorce papers to the city office and moved into a rental apartment I had already signed for. I also asked for 5 million yen in alimony from the girl my ex-husband had cheated with. It was a huge blow for her, since she had quit her job after getting pregnant, but I couldn't forgive her. After our lease was terminated, my ex-husband tried to rely on her, and he immediately filled out the child recognition paperwork after the divorce. However, she eventually broke up with him and demanded 5 million yen a month in child support. On top of that, my ex-husband lost his job when his affair became public, making it hard for him to stay at the company. His parents abandoned him, and he couldn't find a new job, so he ended up sleeping in an internet cafe and working part-time jobs to pay the alimony. My ex-mother-in-law told me that my ex-husband's cholesterol levels had gone up, and he was harming his health. He had been living a careless lifestyle since the divorce. Meanwhile, Susan and I became friends after the divorce, growing even closer than when I was married to Tom. Now, I'm happy living a peaceful life and enjoying my solitude.